Good day, one and all. Welcome to my YouTube channel and podcast, one and all. And today's special guest is none other than Stuart Steele. Welcome to the show, Stuart.
How are you doing? Thank you very much for the welcome.
I was going to say, I want to say firstly, I'm very grateful for giving us your time to come on this show. I'll let you explain in terms of what you do and the whys and wherefores, but the theme for this particular recording is about events, whether it be running events, triathlon events, events that are being cancelled all over the world, and events that are being organised all over the world. And you are an event organiser, so you've been what we might call, how can I put this nicely, at the sharp end of COVID-19 and how it's impacted. People talk about how it's impacted people's businesses, livelihoods, mental well-being, all of the above. I think, Stuart, it's fair to say you've been hit with all of those and some. Would that be right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So go ahead, tell the viewers, listeners, in terms of, obviously you are StuWeb. They can find you, how they can find you on the interwebs and social media. Explain to them what your business is and what you do.
So we're primarily a race timing service provider. So we travel up and down the country most weekends, avoiding families, our own families, and to go and time and record people's achievements. We're quite passionate about that here in the office. We have, and quite often we see people running across the line fully elated that they've got their PB and all of that sort of stuff. And we do, you see, we're there from the fast guys at the front to the shufflers at the back. We see them all. And
the party shufflers.
Yeah, and we treat them all fairly, we're there for everybody. We're not the kind of guys to be packing up as soon as the first 10 guys are across the line. We're there to the bitter end. We also supply ancillary services, so gantries, arches, PA systems, bike racking, and a few other bits and pieces that we can get our hands on. And single-use chips for bib tags for running races, triathlons. We've timed challenge races, Ironman races. Large marathons, small marathons. I think the smallest event we've ever timed was an event of 2 people.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So we organise for tomorrow, just the two of us. Yeah.
and then the largest one, largest event I've worked on personally, as a chief timer, was 26,000. So.
Wow.
It's quite a bit of a weird feeling.
That's as big as Boston Marathon.
It wasn't a marathon, it was a bike ride. So, I was in the background. I wasn't publicly timing it. I was timing it on behalf of somebody else who'd bitten off a little bit more than they could chew.
Right. So it's fair to say that as you were saying, your own words, Stuart, is you're there for everybody, and the joy and elation of people coming over the finish line and getting PBs. So you've been doing this now. How many years? You've been doing it for? Maybe more to mention.
So we have this conversation in the office. So I was timing races in 1998 using electronic systems, not chip timing, but sort of manual timing using electronic sort of PDAs at the time. If the geeks out there, Palm Pilots. Mm-hmm. And we moved into chip timing in 2008, and then I sort of quit my proper job in about 2010, 2011, and this is where I am now. So looking for another proper job.
Yes, 22 years. So, I mean, sometimes with a lot what's been going on with COVID and whatever, how can I delicately, sensitively put this to you in terms of when lockdown happened, basically your business came to an end effectively, because they said you can't have any events.
It's certainly gone to sleep for a few months. That's the good way of describing it.
It
was quite an interesting sort of thing. So we were sitting in the office in sort of early March, and we had we have a board in the office, a whiteboard, and it's like a full order book, and it's what's our next which the next number of weeks we can squeeze on the board. So in March, it's sort of normally most of March and the first week of April, and we sort of like run on a 4-week pattern. Months like September, typically, we can just about fit a week on, because we've got midweek events for governing bodies and things like that, as well as a full stack of Saturdays and Sundays. And it was just a very weird situation. So we're sitting there, we'd spent all winter sort of negotiating contracts, dates and deposits and everything else like that. And then the phone rang sort of, repeatedly every sort of 10, 15 minutes, and people phoning up saying, yeah, we're not going to go ahead. We can't go ahead. We can't do this. We're not sure what's happening. We're going to cancel. What happens if we have to cancel? What sort of notice, all of those questions that we'd already, everybody knew the answers to, and we've very been fair. We've carried over pretty much everything to the following year where people have wanted to. But it was kind of a sort of rabbit in the headlights kind of look, because it's, you have a business, it has costs. And anybody tells you that a business doesn't have costs has probably got another job in the background, and it's not particularly important to them. But we are here Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. There's staff, there's insurance, there's building ownership, there's vehicles insurance and things like that. All, it all adds up every month. And it then started to things. The government bailed out to the tune of £10,000. We got the grant, and we furloughed our staff as best we could. But ultimately, it's getting to the point now where, ideally, we'd have some work. We do have a little bit of work in September, but it's not even a scratch. We'll do about the same in September as we'd normally do on the first Saturday in September. So and that's pretty much what we've done since March.
Right. So as you say, I mean, it's a good way of framing it, saying that it's sort of gone to sleep. It's not the end as such. What do you think? I mean, in terms of looking ahead and what's happening, is because for me, from my perspective, being a sports person, athlete, participant, whatever we may call ourselves, and only the other weekend. And I've got to say a big thank you. I can say personal thank you to you in terms of stepping forward, offering your triathlon bike when I had my bike stolen a couple of weeks before my first triathlon last week. And
wasn't by me, put it that way. So.
But I was very grateful for you offering that bike. I did have another bike. I did get another bike, but so that event for me went ahead, and it was very strange. I don't think they had the regular numbers. There was over 200 people there, so it was a full-on triathlon. Half Ironman distance and a quarter Ironman distance, and as I say, there was over 200 of us. Apart from having to sign a disclaimer form and to wear a mask for the briefing, it seemed to me, having not done any triathlons before, it seemed to me like any other triathlon. So I don't understand. Maybe you can enlighten me, Stuart. As I don't understand why events, if that one went ahead, why are other events cancelling?
It's an interesting conundrum. So if we talk about sporting events in general, we're getting sort of, when we discuss with the organisers, we've got three sorts of people that are, or three sorts of reasons that come through. The first reason is my venue isn't going to let me do it. So the venue, for some reason or for whatever reason, has chosen or feels that the risk is too great, whether that be public perception, whether that be them unable to cope with a large number of people in the way they would do normally. So their facilities, things like toilets and things like that. So, or whether or not they just simply live in an area where the safety advisory groups or the local councils and things like that just aren't willing to take a view on it. So, for example, one local authority, who I won't name, just said, we're not having any events. It doesn't matter what you put through. you could have a 2-person event standing there 10 meters apart. Because you're calling it an event, we're not going to bother. We're just saying no.
Okay.
We've got other organisers or other venues going, what they don't want is the picture on the front page of the newspaper going, look at this bunch of idiots, because they're all standing there socially distanced but carefully taking a photograph at 2-meter gap. You take the photograph at the right angle, it looks bad. You take the photograph at a different angle, everybody's fairly spaced out, and it's just what people don't want in their area. Events do create a little bit of disruption for people. You only look at the histories of things like Challenge. When it first moved to Weymouth, they had people putting oil on hills where the new cyclists would essentially come flying off their bikes. That kind of behaviour does happen. It's very few people that do that, but it does happen. It's quite distressing when you think people go out of their way. But those side of people can also have an effect on the way the locals perceive it. So you don't want to go somewhere where you're not wanted. You can't force your event going through. A friend of mine runs an event down in Weymouth. It's a half marathon. All good to go. Got it through the safety advisory group. Got it through public health. Got everything through. I looked at his plans. It was great. We'd been chatting about it for 6 months, and the council went, "Well, we'd rather you didn't." And it's like, well, you spent all summer having friends and family and families on the beach and great summer, and now all of a sudden it's September and you don't want the event. But the kids have gone to school. It's going to be less busy. How are you? What's the justification for it? And it is just comes down to people's public perception and people's perception of the risks. And then you contrast that with some local authorities, and I'm going to put a shout out to Wolverhampton, who take a very progressive view to events going on. They understand that socially distanced events will go ahead and will have to go ahead. They're of opinion where this thing is going to be around for a while, so maybe we have to put on events which are based around a more spread out way of doing things, not the traditional everybody lining up shoulder to shoulder. They're trying to avoid that, and that's not going to be around for a while. So that's they're the main sort of reasons for sort of the venues. The other issues are people's requirements. So people like Lions clubs, they are, and Rotaries, and it's not a generalisation for those sorts of guys, but they do have a lot of their members are of the shielding higher risk age groups. And they're volunteering their times. Why would you volunteer to put yourself at risk? These guys can, and they do come with complications. Once you get past a certain age, everybody's got a long list of ailments. And so all of a sudden your volunteer base has gone. You can either pay for commercial marshalling companies or stewarding companies, and it just doesn't make the event viable for some of them.
Okay.
And then the other ones, which is they look at the governing body guidelines, British Triathlon, UK Athletics, look at it and go, can't be bothered. And to be fair, you do read some of it and you think, oh, that's a bit true. To be fair to British Triathlon, and I'll mirror this, is that it was a little bit slow getting off the ground, but actually once they did get off the ground, they provided some very useful information, useful bits of feedback. And so once you've read through the documentation, actually it's not that bad. You just need to sort of have a good read and then digest it, and then go back and have another read, take out the stuff that's not relevant to you, for example, and then off you go. A lot of people again looked at it and went, it's too much. It's too much. And they've got full-time jobs, and this is something they do as a bit of fun or an additional thing in their life, or they run it on behalf of their clubs. When it gets to that point, I can see why, and because they don't have to do it. Commercial organisers whose livelihoods and jobs depend on it have to put the events on, and that's the key difference about them going ahead now.
I think you've probably hit the nail on the head there, Stuart. It's a case of you've said it. Those who have to do, those that don't don't, and put that in a nice way. And I'm glad you mentioned Wolverhampton Council, because I did spot on your website. I've been looking through the events on your website, and I did see the Wolverhampton Half Marathon, and I think it's 10k and 5k combined as one event. So that's going ahead in September, isn't it?
It is. Full disclaimer, it's our event. So we were approached last year by the previous organisers of the event. That event's been in a bit of decline and really had a bit of a bad rap last year. Again, due to local residents not really paying attention to the road closures, and also it suffered from a bit of stagnation, really. And I think the current sort of organisers of that, so they basically phoned up and said, "Do you want to do it?" So I was like, "Yeah, fine. Here's the number from the guy in the council." So we sat down with the council, and they came out. We sat down and we came out with an absolutely stunner of a course. Very, very sort of progressive ideas and everything else like that. We were so excited. Excited. We were at the running show. We were all over it, and we've got this fantastic route that they were happy to go ahead with, which meant shutting down a bit of the ring road. That's a bit of a serious
Wolverhampton Ring Road.
I know, yeah. So road closures, proper barriers, and we were in there and spending mentally spending thousands and thousands of pounds to get this event back on its feet. But obviously COVID hit, and the council workers that we were dealing with all got furloughed, or not furloughed, but placed onto other duties. So, one of the leisure guys, he was running a few food bank and a few other bits and pieces. Right. So we all got back together again in sort of late July and said, look, we haven't had any entries, and we're guessing if we asked to put on a city centre event, the answer is pretty much going to be no. And they were like, yeah, that's about right. And we said, well, could we do an event from Aldersley Stadium? We'll do it in loops. We'll keep it all in within the local area. And they were like, well, I can't see why not.
Yeah.
So we went to the safety advisory group, put in the documentation. We had some questions from the doctor, and they asked us to do a bit more spreading out and a few changes here and there. But by and large, they were like, yeah, let's go for it. And this is a model that we used for other events already. Yeah. We run the Birmingham Black Country Half Marathon. That's one of the most socially distanced events ever, because essentially it's a point to point. It's along the canal, yeah, and it's a fantastic run. It's you get to see the worst and the best of the Black Country, absolutely no doubt. But we've been doing this for years, so we understand the process. We understand managing people and getting them in there. And a lot of and we gave the entrance, defer to next year, no penalty, or you can do this. We don't mind. And a lot of people took the option to defer, but just as many decided that they wanted to carry on. And that's kind of where the population is at the moment. Half the people are like, I do want to do something, but not just yet. Or I know, where's the assurances that it's going to be safe? And also, I think the running community have just had their just been bitten so many times with events going, yeah, we can go ahead. Oh no, we can't. So they've entered the money, and everybody writes on the disclaimer or on the terms and conditions, oh, we can defer you to next year at no cost and all of this sort of stuff, and we don't do refunds. And when you read those sorts of things as a runner, you know yourself. It doesn't take long on January the 1st to spend a couple of £100 on race entries, does it?
Yeah.
You sit there and you enter, a dozen races. You 10 minutes in, you've entered this, that, and the other, and you £200 in, 200 quid down in race entries, and then with nothing to show for it for some circumstances.
Yeah.
So
it definitely is that. I mean, that triathlon, I literally entered. I think I had 6 weeks. And only found out it through word of mouth, and it was an accident. But you mentioned about British Triathlon and the rules and regs. They did have 3 representatives at the event. I'm guessing checking everything was being followed, because I think it was the first of its size or type. And but I mean, as you say, people have challenges at the best of times without COVID. Right. I understand that. How can we put this in a nice way? NIMBYs. Type people, not in my backyard. We had it during the Olympics, 2012 Olympics, where people in certain areas in the UK were objecting to the marathon running by their road or the cycling going by their road. And you sort of wonder, do they not understand that one is it's the Olympics, which is once every 4 years in the world, and the likelihood of it going past their house again ever is nil.
Well, that depends if you live in Birmingham and you've got Velo Birmingham. So, and I am all for sport, but the Velo guys, they really went to town when they designed that course and basically cut the Black Country in half.
Yeah.
So, I sympathise. We had issues getting out of the area in the morning because we were going out to time races. We knew about the road closures. But of course, they went in at 3:30 in the morning. Well,
oh, wow.
You live close to a city. You live close to the city of Birmingham. That's actually kicking out time in the nightclubs.
Yeah.
So, all the people trying to get home on a drunken night out. Well, all of a sudden the roads are closed.
Yeah. I appreciate you trying to run a business on that one day. I'm talking people who are at home 7 days a week, and they for some reason decide that one day, whether it be a Sunday, Saturday, or Wednesday, whenever the Olympics was, they want to come out and complain. And I think with COVID, it's almost like, as you say, public perception. I think without wanting to sort of take this conversation into a political COVID debate, which it could very easily become one of those, is that, as you say, it seems to be split, and it's not just the running community, it's all types of runners, athletes, and it's not just elite, because I think people are now beginning to wake up that it's not just about this spread of a virus. And as I say, we won't debate the whys and wherefores, but I was a little bit puzzled when I watched the BBC 6 o'clock news a few months ago. COVID deaths were approaching 50,000. And I watched it the other night, and the total is 41,000. So they seem to have gone backwards. I don't know what's happened there, but the numbers have got smaller. So as I say, I won't go into the debates of the whys and wherefores, but there is two camps: those who want to do something and those who aren't that particularly bothered. And I think for those who want to do something, and certainly what I've seen that's come out of other organisations, and obviously what's happening right now as we speak, Stuart, with schools, that it's been made blatantly aware that it's important for people's mental well-being that they continue to do something rather than stop it completely. So I think I don't know. Do you see a future? As you said, this is not going to disappear, is it? It's not going to disappear overnight.
No.
And
no.
People, like with what Wolverhampton have done, they know that it's going to be around. They need to do something. Do you think there's opportunities there going
I think
forward?
at the moment there needs to be just a little bit more clarification, and when I say a little, I'm thinking something the size of the QE2 oil tanker size. The issue we have is that at the moment the regulations are out there. They're not clear for everybody, and they seem to contradict various different groups for people. They mean different things to different people. We're discussing events. I was out in Coventry last week, and I nipped into, I wanted a coffee, went to Costa, get myself a coffee, wore my face mask, but the Costa was in a Next store. It's got capacity for 125 people in a store, and it's a closed environment. There's air conditioning to recycle everything around and all of that sort of stuff. But 125 people in a shop, in a closed shop, and that doesn't include the Costa in there as well. So okay, you kind of get that. And then you go to the local Wetherspoons that has a capacity of just short of 200, and you think, yeah, fine. And then you think, but I can have an outdoor gathering of 30 people or a wedding of 30 people.
Yeah,
I could spread them out in a table, but because there's the magic number of 30, that's where you're limited. And well, hang on a minute. If I can have 105 people in Next, but I can only have 30 people at my wedding, not my wedding, but a wedding, that doesn't seem right, because those 105 people or 125 people in Next, they're completely random. There's a good chance if you're at the wedding with 30 people, you're going to be in a social bubble with half of those. Anyway,
yes, that's right. Yeah.
By the time you've invited your mom, your dad, your sisters, your cousins, these are the people you've been seeing anyway.
That's right.
So until we can kind of square that circle, I think that the mass participation events industry is just having the raw deal, and I feel the reason it's having the raw deal is that it just doesn't have the money to throw at the problem. Formula One's an easy one. There's a guy in a car spinning around. All of his drivers all spend their time together. It's like working in any office. Yeah. Football, on the other hand, you've got two people from opposite ends of the country playing a football match. There's 15 of one, 15 of the other if you start including the subs and the manager. Before you start talking about the personal trainers, the masseurs, the guys that serve the food in the stadium and all of that sort of stuff. You're getting on for a couple of hundred people, I reckon, in a closed stadium from two different environments. And it doesn't matter what testing protocol you've been in. You're not tested on the morning, are you? You're tested a few days in advance.
Absolutely.
The guy, I can't remember his name, went to spend the weekend with Usain Bolt. He's in Jamaica, and they're asking whether or not he's fit to play football. Surely he's still under 14 days quarantine.
Yes, I know. There does seem to be. I mean, you've hit a good point there, Stuart. Is that it's almost like I can't put this bluntly. I think it's because there's a commercial interest there that they have to progress with it. And there's a demand and a requirement for it. I did find it quite hilarious that when football had stopped, how the BBC were keen to just publish any football match from any country. Yeah. And I think there was an Eastern European country, one country in the whole world that was still playing its league, which sounded a bit bizarre anyway. So the whole world has shut down, but this one country, they carried on and they were displaying that. And then I think the big leagues that restarted, the German one, the Bundesliga was the first one, and looking how that game was when it first started, and they're all just elbow in and touching. Now when you look at the Premier League, they're all jumping over each other, hugging, kissing, back to normal. And
this is the same for the Premier League. This is same for grassroots football.
Yeah.
I coach my son's football team. They're 11 aside. They've got matches in a week's time.
Yeah.
There's no testing available for grassroots football.
No. So those games are going ahead. Everything's fine, going ahead. Yep.
So there's 22 people playing a match.
Yeah. And then people on the sideline cheering.
Yeah. Well, you don't expect 14-year-olds to sort of play on their own without their parents, do you?
Exactly.
How are they going to get there?
Yeah, I won't name any of the marathons that have cancelled with the biggest reason is because they can't control the supporters and crowds. And, we know the solution to that, and it's pretty straightforward. I think they maybe flatter themselves that people, general public, go and watch it. It is basically just friends and family. And as at my event, it was stipulated no supporters. And I told my friends and family, you can't come and support. And that was it. And they didn't turn up. So there's always a solution, I believe, and I think you've sort of answered it there. I think it's if there's a commercial reason, they'll do it and they'll find a way around it. At the end of the day, my summary is really, if with events, and as you say, it is that one you've just given is a perfect example of a store that allows 120 in a closed space, and yet we can't have a wedding with more than 30 people. And we're all in the same social bubble. That just seems a bit bizarre. And when you look at, I was going to give the analogy where it's gone out of my head now. Oh, it's gone. Oh, the joys of live recording. I'm sure it'll come back to me. But I think where we're at is that those who want to do it will find a way and will do it. And those that don't, and as you said, it's not their livelihood, it's not their income, they won't, they'll pull the plug. I think, when these events, one event in particular, they didn't say about social distancing or anything like that. They just said their city is too small to cope with the crowds that they have. And I've ran that event, and I think they flatter themselves. There's sections at the start or finish where there are people, and it is just friends and family. It's not random members of the public who've come out to spectate. No. It's not like those who come to watch Mo Farah. But I just found it quite incredulous how people are sort of latching to a specific, what sounds good, but really is not the real.
But this comes back down to the public perception argument, is that essentially, I think there were some studies done around the Cheltenham Festival and the Bath Half Marathon, and they were discussed, whether or not those events should have been permitted to go ahead. They did go ahead. They were the week before lockdown. Obviously, Cheltenham has got a heavy commercial side, but I don't think the Bath Half is run overly commercially, as much as I know. But it is one of those things that you're bringing an awful lot of people together, and I do understand the point. There are the visuals of it, and I think if they'd have let the London Marathon go ahead, it would have just caused a huge headache for the people who were entered that didn't particularly feel comfortable to do so. What do they do? How do they do it? How do they get around it? And it also would have caused a massive issue in terms of, well, hang on a minute, if we can't let people into a stadium to watch a football match, how can we let them queue up in London to start a race? Even if you halve again the number of people that are available to fill somewhere like Wembley, you're still going to end up with, you're not going to be able to control that sort of arrangement at London. So I think from London's point of view, I just wish they'd have opened up a bit earlier. They've come up with a good solution, and I think what most people are upset about the London Marathon was the time it took them to make that decision. And I'm sure they agonised, and I'm sure they really, really wanted to do that. But again, if you're not going to let people, you're only just letting people go into the cinemas from the 15th of August. You're not going to let you run. The growth of what's going to happen just isn't going to meet the requirement there. So there's 1,001 ideas and ways to do it. But again, I just don't think it would have visually looked. I think it would have just been the whole world pointing their finger and look at these idiots.
Yeah, I think unfortunately that's the way that it is, and they do that before COVID anyway. So
I think there's a famous quote, isn't it? Really, the guy I can't remember. There was a TV program called Becker or something like that, and it was Ted Danson, and he said he says I love London Marathon, I love New York Marathon. 25,000 idiots leave the city. So unfortunately, 2 hours later they come back.
They all come back. Well, the year I ran it, it was over 50,000 idiots. But,
I'm just showing my age. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. There was a time where I think there was only 100 runners, but and I think that one I can understand New York being called off because there you get 2.5 million spectators, and the locals do come out because you're running through Bronx, but you're running through all 5 boroughs, and the locals all do come out. So I can understand that one being pulled.
Americans, go and do if you want to do an event with some great support, just go and do an American event.
Yeah.
Ironman Florida. Every person in Panama City Beach is out there giving you a high five as you're dying 1,000 deaths. And, it's like, oh, great, come on, and you're like, just go away. You're far too happy for the state my leg's feeling. Yeah. And then on Monday, they kind of insist that you wear your medal. So you go around, you go to the local cafe in the morning to get yourself some breakfast, and it's like, got your medal? Well, I don't. It's like you're saying it, but you see it every year.
Yes, I know. It's one of those things. I think that's what I think maybe a lot of people, and some who are watching this, and they can leave it in the comments below. I think that's probably one of the things that people are missing, is that it's not just the participation. It's not just going along. Is that whilst everything sort of turned virtual, which can be a whole debate in itself, there's something about just going along and being at an event. I mean, every marathon I've ran socially distanced. I'm on my own. I'm not running with anyone. Even at the start, if you look at my video at the start of London Marathon, admittedly I'm in the good for age section, not in with the mass start, is I don't come close to anyone. One or two I get close to film just for the video, but even then I don't think I'm within 2 meters of them. So, the race itself and so on it's like a community type thing, and when you finish and you have your cup of tea and a cake, and I think that's what a lot of people are missing, especially with the park runs still not going ahead. But
yes,
but that can be another one. I think they're looking to restart those because again they've realised that the mental well-being of people is more important than a virus.
But even then, it's a bit like everybody's trying to beat the system in a way, and I feel annoyed that people like parkrun saying, go and do not a park run. So, i.e., go to your local park where your park run is, and then go and do it on your own. Well, I mean,
is that what they've said? Is that what they said?
Well, this is one of the things that was going around. It's called not a park run, and we're having a look at this. We went and had a look on Strava. I know a lot of people, part of what I do, I see a lot of people. So I could probably go around, people turn around and say, oh, do you know this guy? Yeah, I've seen him before. I've seen him at a race, and I've seen him before. So, but we worked out there's and especially with the Strava segments, the parkrun segment at one of my local parkruns, I won't embarrass them. There was 118 people did that before 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So that's hardly, people, we're not doing a race. No, you're not doing a parkrun, but you're all kind of there at the same time, kind of doing the same thing, kind of covering the same distance.
Everybody wants to find a way around it, don't they? Yeah.
It's one of my local running clubs has moved to starting their runs from kind of outside my house, which is very entertaining, but they're certainly not in groups of 6 and haven't been in groups of 6. I won't embarrass them, but we haven't got our top on, so we're not running as the club. Really?
Yeah. But you know who they are.
Yeah. I know who they are. I see them at events. My scout leaders.
you need to get your GoPro out, Stuart, and film it. It'd probably make a good TikTok video. But
I wouldn't do it because I wouldn't want to embarrass. And this is the difficulty is that yes, these are the customers of my customers.
Yeah.
My customer is the organizer of an event, and these are my customers, and you wouldn't want to do that. But there have been some fantastic things about the virtual stuff is that everybody got very bored of that very quickly. There are some people that have lived to do it just because they want to get their medals, and it's how they define their lives, and I appreciate that. As an ex-swimmer, I went through difficult period of my life of not being the swimmer anymore. I went from being that guy who was 4:10, 4:05 for a 400 meters freestyle to now comfortably knocking out 5.5, 6 minutes, which is very respectable. And being able to do a tumble turn when you're on holiday, people think you've swum for the Olympics.
Yes, well, you have, haven't you?
Well, no, not even close. And you say, well, like here's the Olympic swimmer, right? And here's me. This is the distance, right? And the guys out there, the scale, the difference between what I do and what you do and what somebody else and what the Olympics guys is massive. But I really want to give a little bit of a plug to a competitor of mine, actually, the guys at Results Base. They've had a lot of sort of virtual runs, virtual challenges, the sticky labels on lampposts, and they've really done well in terms of getting the community and keeping them all ticking over because of they put on events as well. And actually, I follow them on Facebook, but it really is has been a really nice to see it. So Kevin Farmer, and 2 thumbs up, mate. It's I live in the wrong area to come and do it, but it certainly looks like it's been a lot of fun, and you've kept a lot of people ticking over, which I think is a really, really nice thing to do.
I think that's one of the essential things, and really to close on, Stuart, is in terms of looking ahead and going forward, how do you see things going forward? Because as we've already touched on, this COVID isn't going to disappear. I think the World Health Organization, with one breath, they said it's here to stay. And then a few weeks later, they said, it'd be gone within 2 years. I don't know how viruses disappear. Have they got some kind of... Anyway, as I say, we won't talk about these World Health Organizations, but it's here to stay. London Marathon postponed to autumn next year for a reason. It's not... This isn't going to disappear. How do you see events going forward?
I think it's going to be a case of there'll be a lot more little events turning up and putting on by the clubs once the clubs and sort of societies get their head around what's available, and looking at their events that they've had a little bit more differently. I think a lot of people said, I can't do that, and I can't put that event on. That was my event, and so they're going to have a bit of a mourning process, and then they're going to get the government guidance, which is going to change. I think October, this is the next sort of serious review after the schools and everything go back. But then they've got to look at that event and go, right, I'm not going to be able to fit this square peg into a round hole. What can I do instead? And this is where you're going to get the innovators in the area, a bit like the Kevin Farmer's results-based guys. They're going to do something different, and it's going to change. And then the next thing is going to be the next thing, and then it's going to be, we're going to do it socially distanced. Cyclists have been doing the time trial for years,
exactly,
and the sportives and things like that, and it's the non-competitive participation, and I think there's going to be a little bit of that sort of critical mass, the approach where people, let's say, look, let's go and do a run, and they're going to turn up and go and do a run, and the timing stuff that we provide is irrelevant. I think we have to sort of get past the competition and the organised races. They're certainly going to exist, and the commercial organisers are going to make it work for them. But in the stopgap, we've just got to keep ourselves ticking along and find ways to have fun with the sport. Going out for a run, just because you don't have to. Goals and events are great target setters for people. We had a conversation a couple of days ago. Setting goals, rigid goals, is very difficult and psychologically quite damaging. And what we need to do is start looking at the goals that we want to put out there, and make sure that they're achievable, and that if it doesn't happen, there's an alternative, or you can reward yourself in other ways rather than the finish line medal or that sort of thing. Let's not beat ourselves up about it, because you've got to go with the flow, unfortunately, with this one.
Absolutely. So I think on that note, we can end, and all I can say is thank you very much for your time, Stuart, and your philosophy on life. You seem very chilled and relaxed about this. I'm sure, like the swan, you look all calm and relaxed on top.
When the COVID stuff started coming in and we could just see the events cancelling one after the other, my missus turned around to me, why aren't you panicking? And I said, would it help?
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing we can do, is there? No. So
it is what it is. It will work itself out.
A bit like the guy in the dike where he's plugging the holes. He's only got so many fingers, and if we can't control anything, then I think that's why stress and anxiety is caused a lot. But
well, it's the squirrel in Ice Age, isn't it? Really, he keeps going after that nut. He keeps after that nut. It just doesn't always get it. But
yeah, that's a very modern take on the finger in the dike.
Yeah.
Finger in the dike. But anyway, thank you so much for your time, Stuart, and I'm sure we'll have you back on with some other updates and things and so on and so forth.
No worries.
Thanks again for your time, and I'm sure everybody watching, listening, appreciates your input, and I wish you the very best with what is coming forward and how we look into the future. So thank you so much, Stuart, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.